A grocery man from Tennessee once walked onto Wall Street and nearly broke it. No banker, no insider, just a guy who sold flour and soap for a living. By noon, he had the richest men in America trapped and sweating and begging him for mercy. And within that same week, it had all blown up in his hands. His company, his fortune, his pink marble mansion, even the rights to his own name. Gone. But here is the part that should stop you cold. Long before any of that, this same man had quietly invented something you have used your entire life. The shopping cart. The aisle. The price tag on the shelf. The checkout line, where your kids always begged for the candy. All of it. Him. His name was Clarence Saunders, and this is the story of how one man invented the way the whole world buys its food, got richer than a barefoot farm boy could ever dream, and then lost it all. Not once. Twice. Let's get into it. He started with absolutely nothing, and I do not mean that as a figure of speech. Clarence Saunders was born on a hardscrabble farm in Amherst County, Virginia in 1881. His mother died when he was 5 years old. His father, a Confederate veteran who once rode with Stonewall Jackson, could barely keep food on the table, so the whole family drifted down to Tennessee to sharecrop land that belonged to other men. The boy got 2 years of schooling. He walked away from it at 14 to work the general store full-time, sweeping the floors, oiling the machinery, and trimming the kerosene lamps for $4 a month and a cot in the back room. But he watched everything, and he taught himself to read, hungrily, obsessively, the way a person reads when a book is the only door out of the life they were born into. He read about business. He read about big men who built big things. And somewhere in all that reading, a poor Tennessee farm boy quietly decided he was going to be one of them. By the turn of the century, he was a wholesale grocery salesman, making about $30 a month. He married a woman named Carolyn Walker, the daughter of a prominent attorney, and moved to Memphis, a booming river town, to make his fortune. And he had already spotted the thing that would make him rich. Every grocer he knew was quietly going broke. And they were all going broke in exactly the same way. In fact, he was so sure of it that 3 years before Piggly Wiggly, he had already taken a first crack at fixing it, with a little company called United Stores. It did fine. It did not change the world, but it taught him the problem cold. And to understand the fix he finally landed on, you have to understand how buying food actually worked back then, because it is almost nothing like today. You walked into the store, handed your list to a clerk, and then you waited. The clerk walked the shelves for you, one item at a time, fetching your flour, your coffee, your soap, your sugar, while you just stood there doing nothing. And if there were 3 people in line ahead of you, well, you waited for every single one of them. First, on top of that, nearly every store ran on credit and delivered right to your door, with a boy and a horse and a wagon. Which sounds cozy, and it was, until you remember that somebody had to pay for that boy and that wagon, and for every customer who ran up a tab and quietly never paid it back. So the prices were sky high, and the grocers were drowning in it. Saunders looked at the whole broken machine, and he had one brutal, simple thought. What if the customer did the work? On September the 6th, 1916, at 79 Jefferson Avenue in Memphis, Tennessee, he opened a store unlike anything that had ever existed on the face of the earth. It was tiny, barely more than 1,000 square feet. But inside, he had torn out the counter completely. He put a turnstile right at the front door. He handed every customer a wooden basket, and then he funneled them down one long, winding, one-way path past every product in the store. And there were over 1,000 of them, nearly 4 times what an ordinary grocery carried. Each and every item wore its own price tag. The same price for everybody. No haggling. No clerk fetching things for you. No credit. No delivery. You picked your own groceries. You carried them to the front yourself. You paid in cash, and you walked out. Nobody had ever done this, and Saunders did not just build it, he locked it down. He filed a patent on the entire idea, the layout, the turnstile, the self-serving floor, the whole design. And then he slapped a name on it so strange, so ridiculous, that people are still arguing about it more than 100 years later. Piggly Wiggly. A reporter asked him, flat out, why on earth he picked that. And Saunders just smiled and said, so people will ask that very question. That was it. That was the whole answer. Some say he saw little pigs wriggling under a fence from a train window. Nobody really knows. He took the real reason to his grave on purpose because he understood that the mystery itself was free advertising. Opening day was a full-blown carnival. There was a brass band. There was a beauty contest. There were flowers for the ladies and balloons for the children, and Saunders had reporters standing at the door, dressed up as judges, pressing $5 and $10 gold coins into the hands of the women walking in, until finally they simply ran out of coins. Nobody had ever seen a grocery store behave like that, because nobody had ever seen a grocery store like this at all. And Saunders knew exactly what he had. Within months, he was bragging that his Piggly Wigglies would, in his own words, multiply and replenish the earth with more and cleaner things to eat. By the end of that first year, there were 9 of them. And if you are over 50 watching this right now, you already know exactly what he built, because you lived inside it. That grinning little cartoon pig up on the sign, the shopping cart that always had that one bad wheel, the long cold aisle, the low hum of the freezer case, and the candy sitting right there at the register, staring your kids down while you waited to pay. That was him. Every bit of it. Him, in fact. Piggly Wiggly was the first grocery store in America to put in refrigerated cases so you could buy things cold that you never could before. And Saunders had figured out one more thing that the entire retail world still uses on you to this very day. When people see more, they buy more. So he put the temptation exactly where you could not possibly miss it, right there at the register, at a child's eye level. Quick thing while we are here. If forgotten stories like this one are your kind of thing, do me a favor and hit that subscribe button. It honestly helps this channel more than you would ever think. Okay, back to it. Because his little store spread like a wildfire. Within 1 year, 9 stores. By 1921, 615 of them, spread across 40 states. And the way he grew it was ruthless and brilliant. He franchised the concept, but every franchise store had to be built to his exact specifications. Strict cash and carry, no credit, no delivery, ever. Standardized signs, standardized layouts, uniforms on the clerks. He even sent in efficiency experts to time the workers and shave seconds off of every task. It was the assembly line brought to the corner grocery. He listed the company on the New York Stock Exchange, and by 1923, there were 1,267 Piggly Wigglies, paying investors a fat 11% dividend. The idea he invented was so good that copycats were sprouting everywhere, with names like Handy Andy and Helpy Selfie and Jitney Jungle. And the machine he built would eventually swell to more than 2,600 stores, doing over $180 million a year. The barefoot farm boy who once trimmed lamps for $4 a month was now one of the richest men in the entire American South. So, naturally, he built himself a palace. And I mean that literally. A sprawling mansion faced entirely in pink Georgia marble. He named it Cla Leclerc after his 3 children, but the people of Memphis took one look and christened it the Pink Palace, and that name stuck. It had a golf course, with one hole set on its very own island. It had a bowling alley, a ballroom, an indoor pool, a shooting range, and a pipe organ. He poured more than $1 million into that house. And here is the very first thing I need you to circle in your mind, because it tells you everything about how this man was wired. He spent that entire staggering fortune on borrowed dreams. And he never, not one single night, slept in that house. Because Clarence Saunders never lost because his idea was wrong. He lost because he could not stop betting the whole thing. And right now, at the very peak of his life, there were 2 guns already loaded, sitting quietly on the wall, just waiting to go off. The first gun. You cannot patent an idea that people can simply look at and copy. And copy him they did, with all those knockoff chains eating into his lead. The second gun. Everything. Everything he had built on top of other people's money, and both of those guns were about to fire at once. Up north, in New York, by the end of 1922, a small handful of Piggly Wiggly franchises up in New York went under. Now, they had nothing at all to do with Saunders' own company, which was perfectly healthy and printing money, but it did not matter because Wall Street had smelled blood in the water. A pack of speculators started short-selling Piggly Wiggly stock. And in plain English, that means they placed a giant bet that the price was going to fall, and to help it fall a little faster. They started quietly whispering all over town that the whole company was secretly rotting from the inside. Now, a smarter man, or maybe just a colder one, would have shrugged it off and let them tire themselves out. But Saunders could not. He took it as a personal insult. An attack on him, on Memphis, on the entire South. Wall Street was swooping down on his company, he said, like an eagle on a chicken. So he decided to do something that had almost never been pulled off by an outsider, before or since. He decided to corner the stock, to go out and buy up so many shares that the men betting against him would have nowhere left on earth to buy, and would be forced to come crawling back to him, and pay whatever price he chose to name. And here is the detail you simply have to sit with for a second. Aside from his own company, Clarence Saunders had never bought or sold a single share of stock in his entire life. Not one. He was a grocer. And he was about to try to break the New York Stock Exchange. So, he borrowed big, about $10 million from banks all across the South, which is somewhere around $150 million in today's money. And, as the story goes, with quiet help from one of the most feared traders who ever lived, a man named Jesse Livermore, he started buying up every share he could get his hands on. He rolled into New York on a private train, with suitcases stuffed full of cash and armed guards at his side. One New York newspaper actually warned Wall Street to go put locks on its safes because, and this is a real quote, "Clarence is here with the open and avowed purpose of teaching New York the financial game." And the stock began to climb. From that low of $39 a share, up past $60, and then higher still. But Saunders had a problem, and he knew it. If he ever tried to sell all those shares back onto the exchange, the price would collapse in his hands. He needed a back door. So he did something audacious. He took out full-page ads in newspapers all over the country and started selling Piggly Wiggly stock directly to ordinary people at a fixed price of $55 a share. This was a once-in-a-lifetime chance, the ads promised, and the profit was going to be big. He was building his own private market right under Wall Street's nose. Within a few short weeks, Saunders controlled the orders for 196,000 of the 200,000 shares that existed in the entire world. He owned almost all of it. The trap was set and baited and ready. On March the 20th, 1923, he sprang it. He called in all the shares he had loaned out and demanded they be delivered back to him the very next day. And just like that, the men who had bet against him had 24 hours to find stock that did not exist, because Saunders was sitting on nearly all of it. So they panicked. They scrambled. They bought at any price they could possibly get. And Piggly Wiggly stock rocketed all the way up to $124 a share by noon. He had them. The country grocer had the great sharks of Wall Street by the throat. The newspapers were already crowning him, calling him the young Piggly Wiggly Napoleon, the country boy who whipped New York at its own game. Even the New York Times seemed to enjoy watching an outsider get his foot on Wall Street's neck. And this, right here, is the very top of the mountain. So, before it all comes crashing down, let me ask you for one quick thing. If you are the kind of person who still remembers when a Piggly Wiggly sat right there on your corner, do me a favor and hit that subscribe button, because this channel is where these forgotten stories stay alive. That is it. Now, let's get back to the fall. Because here is where that second gun fires, the one about other people's money, and as it turns out, other people's rules. Just hours after Saunders reached the peak, the men he had beaten did not pay him. Instead, they went upstairs to the governors of the stock exchange. And the exchange did something absolutely extraordinary. It suspended all trading in Piggly Wiggly stock. And then, it changed the rules on him right in the middle of the game, handing the short sellers 5 extra days to go and dig up shares from little old ladies and small holders scattered in tiny towns all across the country. And that broke the corner. Not the market, the referee. Moving the goalposts, long after the whistle had already blown. A few days later, the exchange delisted Piggly Wiggly stock entirely, claiming there was such a concentration of holdings that a free market was now impossible. Saunders was apoplectic. He demanded $150 a share, but the shorts called his bluff, and it turned out there were far fewer of them than he had ever believed. In the end, he had to settle for $100, and it was not enough. It was not even close. He cleared maybe $500,000 on the deal, which sounds like a fortune, until you remember he was still $5 million in debt, with $2.5 million of it coming due that very September. And not $1 of it had ever been his own. He was now buried under a wall of debt he could not possibly pay, sitting on a mountain of stock nobody wanted. Memphis tried to save him. Banners went up all over the city, reading "Save Piggly Wiggly for Memphis." He even sat down and wrote a letter to Henry Ford himself, begging for a bailout. It all fizzled out. At one tense meeting, he got into an actual fist fight with one of his own financial backers, and walked out of the room with blood running down his cheek. In August of 1923, it was finally over. He resigned. He handed over every last thing, his stock, his cars, and the still unfinished Pink Palace, that pink marble mansion he had never once slept in. Some of his shares would later sell at auction for a single dollar. The man who invented the supermarket had just lost the supermarket, and they gave him a cruel new nickname for it, too. The Boob from Tennessee. And he never, ever forgave them. Wall Street got licked, he snarled and called its mama. And of course, Mama heard the cry of her petted child. The city of Memphis took his palace and turned it into a museum. Now most men, after a beating like that, would have crawled into a hole and never come out again. But Clarence Saunders was not most men. Within just a few short years, he would claw his way all the way back to being a millionaire all over again. And then he would lose every last penny of it a second time. He wanted right back into the grocery business. But there was a problem. His old company now legally owned the name Piggly Wiggly, and they turned around and sued him to stop him from ever using his own name to compete against them. So Saunders did the single most Clarence Saunders thing imaginable. He opened up a brand new chain of stores, and he named it, in full, in giant letters over the door, Clarence Saunders, sole owner of my name, Stores. The story goes that a judge, in the middle of wiping him out in bankruptcy court, had sneered down at him and said, "You, sir, own nothing. You are only the sole owner of your name." So Saunders took that insult and he bolted it up over the door of every single store he built. A giant, daily, public dare. And, incredibly, it worked. Again, the sole owner stores were self-service, just like before, but sharper this time, with fresh meat counters and real bakeries. Nearly 1,000 of them opened up. He got rich. Again, he built himself a second grand estate. And because the money was rolling in, and this man physically could not sit still, he went out and bought himself a professional football team. He renamed them, of course, the Clarence Saunders Sole Owner Tigers. And he would show up to their practices dressed in his full three-piece business suit just to catch a few punts out on the field. And here is how good they got. On December the 15th, 1929, just 1 week after the Green Bay Packers had won their very first championship, Saunders' little grocery store football team went out and beat those reigning world champions 20-6. They were such a draw that when the most famous player in the country, a man named Red Grange, came to Memphis with the Chicago Bears, 6,500 people packed the stands to watch. The next year, the National Football League itself invited the Tigers to officially join the league. And Saunders said no, because, reportedly, he simply did not care for all the travel. He was flying. And he never, not for one single second, saw the ground rushing up to meet him. Because you already know exactly what happened. In the autumn of that very same year, 1929, the stock market collapsed. The Great Depression opened up and swallowed the entire country whole, and that same gun, the one that had killed him the first time, all that debt, all that borrowed money, all that betting of the entire thing on one single roll, it fired one more time. By 1930, the sole owner chain was bankrupt. Saunders lost his second fortune. He lost his beloved football team. And he lost his second estate, which was eventually sold off to a famous baseball star named Bill Terry. Twice a millionaire. And twice wiped completely clean. And still, he could not stop. Because Clarence Saunders never lost because his idea was wrong. He lost because he could not stop betting the whole thing. And now, broke all over again, an aging man well past his prime, he sat down and made the single biggest bet of his entire life. On a machine, he had always been haunted by one final idea. A grocery store with no clerks at all. A store that ran itself completely. He called it Keedoozle, as in Key does all. And here is how the thing actually worked. All of the groceries sat locked away behind glass, like one giant vending machine the size of an entire store. You walked the aisles holding a little key, and whenever you saw something you wanted, you stuck your key into a slot right beside it. The machine punched your order onto a roll of paper tape, and a hidden system of circuits and conveyor belts back behind the wall was supposed to gather up all of your groceries and shoot them right up to the front counter. And because it needed so few workers, everything was priced 10 to 15% below every other store in town. The very first Keedoozle opened its doors on May the 15th, 1937, and on paper, it was the future. But it was 1930s technology trying to do a job from the 21st century. And it broke. Constantly during the busy hours, the circuits jammed. The conveyor belts could not keep up with the flood of orders. Customers walked out clutching bags full of the wrong groceries. The first store failed within months. He tried again in 1939. It failed again when the Second World War came. He set the dream aside, and in a strange twist for a man who once cornered Wall Street, he spent those years making simple wooden toy wagons and baby strollers and broomsticks. But he came back to it one final time, in 1948. An old man now, still swinging. He sold 12 franchises, and he boldly predicted 1,000 Keedoozles all across America within just 5 years. Instead, Time magazine reported that his one and only store went, quote, kerplunk, and that in just 11 months, Saunders had lost $170,000. And in the end, he admitted it himself. Keedoozle, he said, was simply too much for the average mind to comprehend. And yet, even then, he was not finished. When he finally died, he was already deep at work on his next machine. He called this one Food Electric. It was a store where a little computer, a shopping brain, would be handed to each customer, and it would quietly tally up your groceries as you walked the aisles so that you could ring yourself up and skip the checkout line entirely. "I can handle a $2 million volume," he bragged, with only 8 employees. So sit with this for just a moment. In the early 1950s, a broke old man in Memphis, Tennessee, sat down and sketched out, in full detail, the self-checkout lane, the exact one you used last week. He was right. He was just 30 years too early, and completely out of money, and finally, out of time. Clarence Saunders died of heart failure on October the 14th, 1953. He was 72 years old. The Food Electric store never opened its doors. Near the very end, they say he would drive himself out to the Pink Palace, that beautiful marble mansion he had built and never once lived in, now a public museum full of other people's things, and he would just sit there and look at it and say, "If I never did anything else, well, there's that. It'll be there as long as the pyramids stand." And you know what? He was right about that too. The Pink Palace still stands in Memphis to this very day, now part of the city's Museum of Science and History, and inside it there is a small, perfect replica of that very first store, with the old prices still sitting right there on the shelves. 2-cent boxes of cornflakes, 8-cent cans of soup, and Piggly Wiggly itself still stands as well. More than 500 of them spread across 18 states, all these long years later. But the real monument to the man is not the pig, and it is not the palace. It is the simple fact that you cannot walk out of a store today holding a loaf of bread without walking straight through his idea. Every aisle, every price tag, every basket, every single candy bar sitting at the register that your kid begged you for. And every single time you scan your own groceries and bag them up yourself and walk out that door, you are finishing the exact machine that he died trying to build. He invented the way the entire world buys its food. He got richer than a barefoot farm boy could ever dream. And then he lost it. And he built it right back. And then he lost it again because Clarence Saunders never lost. Because his idea was wrong. He lost because he could not stop betting. The whole thing. He just never learned the one lesson that could have saved him. That the man who invents the future does not always get to keep it. Now I want to hear from you. If you grew up with a Piggly Wiggly right there on your corner, do me a favor and tell me the town down in the comments. I read every single one.